Hi folks, so this is lesson 4 on finding the height of a cylinder. Now recall from previous lesson that we know how to work out the volume of a cylinder by using this formula here. So volume equals pi r squared h, where pi r squared is the area of this circular face on the end of a cylinder. Now what we can do if we're trying to work out the height of a cylinder, we can rearrange this formula to get it in terms of just h. Now if you're very confident with your algebraic skills, so really confident with changing subject to the formula, what I could do straight away is I could take this formula, v equals pi r squared h, and I could just, to get h by itself, I could just divide both sides by pi r squared. So I get v divided by pi r squared is equal to h by itself. And we can just use this new formula to work out the height. Now, the way we're going to do this in examples is I'm going to input the numbers first before I rearrange this this formula. However, you can do this way if you want. So looking at example 1, we're given a cylinder here and we want to work out the height of this cylinder. Now, I'm given a volume, so I'm going to go straight to my volume formula. So volume is pi r squared h. Now the next thing I'm going to do, as you always would do in a formula, is input all the numbers and I'll input all the values that I know. So in this case, the volume is 141.4. That's equal to pi is just pi, so pi multiplied by the radius squared. Now the radius in this case is 3, so we're not given a diameter here, just a radius. So 3 squared multiplied by h. Okay, so now what we're trying to do is isolate h, so get h by itself. So in order to do that, I just take all the bits that are multiplying h, which is the pi times 3 squared, and I'm going to divide both sides by that. So what I end up with is 141.4 divided by, or over, pi times 3 squared. And that is equal to h by itself. So there we go, we now have h in terms of all just these numbers. And what I can do is I can just fire that into my calculator. I just need to be careful that I'm doing it, putting in my calculator precisely. Now in this case, if you have a fancy calculator with your fraction button, you can put this in as a fraction as you see it, and then calculate it that way. Otherwise, what you could do is 141.4, then divided by, and when you put the divided by bit, you're going to put that in a bracket. So what you're dividing by. So in a bracket goes pi multiplied by 3 squared. And what we end up with is 5, pretty much exactly. So straight up 5. So the height is equal to 5. And we were in centimetres here, so cm. Now, what I recommend you do at this point is, can you just make sure that, grab your calculator, make sure that you can calculate this 141.4 divided by pi times 3 squared, and you get 5 out. Okay, so I want you to try that right now before we move on. Okay, so moving on to example 2. So we're given a section of pipe here. So you can see again it's a cylindrical section of pipe. It is a total volume of that and a diameter of 30 centimetres, and we want to find the length of the section. Okay, so it's very similar to the previous question. We're asked for like the length, or if I was to rotate that around, the height of the cylinder. Okay, so straight off, and I know I'm given the volume here, so I'm going to go straight to the volume formula. So the volume of a cylinder is pi r squared h. And again, just to make this really clear, that our h in this case is the length of the cylinder. Okay, so because the cylinder's lying down, that would be the length, but still h in the formula. Right, so in order to do this, what we're going to first do is put in all our information. So the volume we know is this 212,057.5. And that is equal to pi times the radius. Now the radius, this case, remember the radius is only half the width of the cylinder. So in this case, our diameter is 30, therefore our radius, so if our diameter is 30, our radius must be half of that, so 15. Okay, so pi times 15 squared times h. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is identify this h we're trying to work out. So we need to get h by itself. So the way we do this is we take all this pi times 15 squared and we divide both sides by that, and that will give us just h by itself. So we end up with 212,057.5 divided by that pi times 15 squared. And on the right hand side, remember that's disappeared now, so we're just left with h. And then at this point, all we need to do is just put this straight into our calculator. So again, being extra careful that we're putting into a calculator correctly. So we're dividing by, and then if I'm doing this the long method, dividing by, I'm putting a bracket round pi times 15 squared. And that comes out to be, you can see we're almost exactly again. So we've got 299 point, and a lot of nines after that. Okay, but we're asked in the question, round your answer to the nearest centimetre. So I've written my unrounded answer there, but to the nearest centimetre, well, that would just go up to 300 centimetres. Okay. And the final example is one where we're not going to be using our calculator. So we might have to do a wee bit of something a wee bit different in this question. However, the procedure will still be very similar. So example 3, we're given a paperweight and it's in the shape of a cylinder. It's got a volume of 64 pi cubic centimetres and a width of 8 centimetres as it's shown in the diagram. We want to know what the height of this cylinder is. Now bear in mind that this volume 64 pi is just a number. Remember, pi is something we can calculate. However, we're not given a calculator here, so we've just left it in terms of pi. And it might actually make things a wee bit easier in terms of rounding. We won't have to do much. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So again, we're given the volume of a cylinder, so let's go ahead with the volume formula. So volume is pi r squared h. Okay, let's input our information now. So we've got 64 pi for the volume. And on the right hand side, we've got pi multiplied by the radius squared. Now we need to be careful again, because in this question we're given 8 is the full width of this cylinder, so that would be the diameter. So the diameter is 8, therefore the radius is 4. So pi multiplied by 4 squared multiplied by the height. Okay, right, so remember we're not using a calculator in this case, so we need to do a wee bit extra mental maths here. So the first thing we need to do, let's see if we can get h by itself in the first place. So again, we just take everything that's multiplying h, which is all of that, and just divide both sides by that. So we're left with, on the left hand side, 64 pi divided by or over pi times 4 squared is equal to h. Now, we have our calculation now to do for h, however we've not got a calculator for this, so we're going to have to see if we can do anything with this left hand side. So I'll just rewrite it as h on the left hand side, but 64 pi, is not really much we can do with that right now, but on the bottom line we can do a wee bit of calculation here. So pi times 4 squared, well I know 4 squared is 16, and pi is just pi at the moment, so I can write that as 16 pi. Now remember your rules of algebra here, if I've got no sign in between 16 and pi, it's implied that I'm multiplying, so this means 16 multiplied by pi. But hopefully you can see at this point, this is quite nice, because if I've got a pi in the top of a fraction and a pi in the bottom of a fraction, both multiplying in each case, then they'll just cancel each other out. I can divide top and bottom of the fraction by pi, they cancel out. So you can see h is just now a nice fraction. So h comes out to be just 64 over 16. And 64 over 16 is again something we can just calculate. Now, those of you who are good at your 16 times tables will realise that 16, how many times 16 goes into 64? So just 4 times. So our answer here is just going to be 4. So dividing top and bottom by 16 in that case. And you could cancel the fraction down if you can't see that straight away. Divide top and bottom by any number you know they both divide by, so you could half top and bottom, then half it again and so on, but you should get down to 4. So we end up with 4 centimetres. So that would be the height. So you can see our diagram's a wee bit off, but our maths tells us that that is correct. Now, what I would recommend you do is, again, as always, use the examples to the maximum benefit. So go back in the video, try the examples again. You've got these examples in your notes as well, so blank notes. So try this without the solution in front of you. Make sure you can do it. Double check your work against the solution in the video. And if you're happy with that, feeling confident, then you can move on to the practice questions. And again, if you have any questions, just ask your math teacher. Okay?